Alrighty everyone, hello and welcome. My name is Bengalcatz. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Twitch streamer who plays The Sims basically exclusively. Today I am continuing my Not So Berry legacy builds. Today we are building for the Plum generation. Now the Plum generation is a little special. They have an extra touch of midlife crisis. They start in an apartment home and we move them to a big house where they become a doctor and they think that they have everything in life. And eventually they move on and realize that they want to be a professional dancer. Now you can make up the fact that they're a dancer or do what I'm going to do, which is get mods, but whatever brings you happiness. When I am building for a Not So Berry home, I like to add in more colors rather than just the color for the generation. So even though this is the Plum gen, and we're going to be focusing on eggplants, plums, all shades of purple even, just because The Sims is obviously limited without the Sims 3 color wheel, it's important that we add other colors in, such as accent plain colors such as gray, white, black, whatever brings you happiness, light brown, dark brown with the woods. But I like to add in colors of the next generation. So the next generation coming in after this is orange. So I like to use orange as kind of my backup color, or just to kind of split the colors up a bit when it becomes a little too overwhelming. Now, when I'm building a house, for whatever reason, I always start with the kitchen. I'm not sure what it is. That's just how I go about things. Then I inevitably place out 100 swatches, figuring out what the family is going to be like. And it's kind of hard when I'm building all of these for the series and I don't know what this family is going to be like yet because I'm currently only on yellow generation. I am building these on my Twitch. My Twitch is at Bengalcatz. I stream Sunday mornings, Eastern Standard Time, as well as Tuesdays and Thursday nights at 7:30. I gotta be honest, rugs are the number one thing that I struggle with. Rugs are absolutely evil, as I'm sure probably most of you can relate to. I really try to avoid using any kind of CC in my builds, especially when I'm building and posting on the gallery like this one is. My gallery is a little different. My gallery is at Bengalcatz 525. I like to pull out all of the options and see what kind of matches best with the theme that I'm going for. Now, in this home, this is where the Plum generation heir is going to be a doctor. So they're going to have nicer things. Their house is going to be a bit nicer. You have the stained glass on the archways. It's a nice, big, stereotypical suburban home that a lot of us might recognize. And it's the Plum generation thinking that they have got it made, that this is the dream and this is everything that they want it to be. And I decided that my Plum generation is actually going to go live on the beach. So my final Plum gen home I built on Sulani, and it's just a fun beach build, and it has tons of orange in there because they're living free and a little more connected with their kids, which I think is really, really important. Especially because going from a doctor, the stereotype of doctors is that they are not as close to their kids as they should be. You know, they spend all those hours working and it's really, really tricky. In these builds, I've really tried to start to challenge myself to make the space as productively used as possible. This is also pre my using the Sims 3 camera, so you'll see me pull out tool, especially when it comes to decorating. I was trying to avoid going back to the Sims 3 camera, but I did one day just for funsies to see how well I could pick it back up, and turns out it was the best decision I ever made, and now I am never going back. It makes me realize how much I actually missed Sims 3. While I love the Sims 4 graphics, and I think the Sims 4 adds a lot, there are aggressive amounts of touches to Sims 3 that I really do miss, such as the color wheel and open world. Now, this corner, rounded rooms, although they're absolutely lovely and I think an amazing addition, they really struggle with windows, so you watch me absolutely struggle bus here. I tried to use my accent color in this house as gray because right before the plum gen is the gray gen, and they actually have a really good relationship with their kid. Gray gen, they do movie nights every Sundays, and that is super duper important. They worked really hard on having a good relationship with their kids, so plum gen wants to probably memorialize that if they can. I also spent a lot of this build playing with archways rather than using doorways or just having an open-ish floor plan with no kind of archway or doorway. I really wanted to embrace that a little bit more. Now in the corner over here, I really looked to putting a whole bunch of different skills that they could do. Plum Gen ends up having that midlife crisis where they're not sure what they want to do with their lives. So I want to just put a whole bunch of things over here so they can bond with their kids and they can explore all the things that they want to do. And considering that they become a ballerina, it's super important that they have a whole bunch of creative skill sets that they can take over. They have a couple pets. I think I had put a little hamster in there, and they also have a dog that I end up putting in stuff for. That floral wallpaper from Lovestruck is, it has me every which way. I am 100% obsessed with it and try to use it in every single one of my builds. I've recently started, when I'm building, I used to always do the walls and floors first. I've recently switched to going and doing my furniture first because I've found that as I've built more and more as I've been on Twitch and just playing The Sims more in general, I've found that those are the parts that emphasize your furniture, and your furniture is really the personality. So it's super important, in my personal opinion, to do furniture first and then switch to walls, because the walls should help emphasize the story you're trying to tell. The walls are not usually the story. Here you see me fighting curtains with my life, especially on that curved wall. It's the worst thing in existence. I actually sped this part up a little bit extra because who wants to see me fight curtains for 10 minutes? Here's where you see me using tulle where I would not normally need to use tulle. I think for whatever reason, it was just these curtains were being silly and making my life awful. Now, full baths I often really struggle with. I never know how big to make them. When I was growing up, my family was really lucky. My bathroom that I shared with my sister was huge, so it was tricky to, know how big to make a bathroom. I think that's what I struggle with most, is I always want to make them huge and have all of these crazy things. If you look at my Rose Gen build, the upstairs bathroom is huge and ends up being a logistical nightmare when it comes to gameplay. My sim was always getting stuck and caught, and I ended up having to move and delete some of my clutter, and it was just an absolute struggle bus. I sometimes end up at points when I'm building where I see one thing I like and then I see another thing I like, and I will see I used that wallpaper again. I try to use that wallpaper anywhere I can. I'll pull out different things. When I'm looking for something else, I'll find another item like a wardrobe or some storage that I might want to use somewhere else. So that's why you'll see me often jump around in different areas. I'll leave things out in the yard quite a bit just because I want to maximize my time and my space as much as possible. And if I find something that I really like, why am I going to go back and look for it again when it is right there waiting for me? Weirdly, I thought Plum Gen was going to be really tricky to build for. Now, obviously, I utilize all the purples, not just Plum, because that would make it pretty impossible. It would make my options fairly limited and wouldn't be nearly as much fun, I think. I would love to at some point make builds where it's as much one color as possible, even if it's not all the same style. Because I'm using these builds for my storytelling, I don't want to make them purely the same exact shade of purple or of orange, because I want to have it tell a story, and I'm doing my Not So Berry on Twitch. So I really wanted to make sure that it was multicolored and looked like a family would live there, and they just happened to be obsessed with the color purple. But I think it would be really fun and unique if I went through and decided to do a fully pink, it's all the same exact shade of pink home. I think that would be really interesting and fun. Maybe that'll be my next challenge once I am all done with my Not So Berry builds. When I build homes for my Not So Berry, I normally build for the nursery, but I also keep in mind that I am going to need space for multiple kids, for, teenage beds as they get older. So some of these rooms won't be used right away, but I want them there and ready. This area just kind of turned into a catch-all space. So I had extra bookshelves, I had the desk. I put knitting in there. I think I put a bonsai tree in there a little bit later on. This is where I'm starting to go through, and what I usually do in these situations is I filter by color first. I pull out the things that I want that match that color, and then I go back through and I look at other things that I would want to add that might not be in the color but would be really useful. Maybe it's in my accent colors, such as gray or orange or light brown for this home, and I figure out how to make it all work. Yep, and once I end up at decor, I do end up bouncing a lot from room to room, because I'll look at something when I'm cluttering, which I love a good clutter, but when I'm cluttering, I tend to go section by section. So I'll go through all the plants and I'll say, oh, this plant would look really nice, and I figure out where I'm going to put it in the home, and then I start going through all the paintings and then the wall decor, the sculptures, or the little statues. So I end up jumping around quite a bit for this. I like to figure out how I can use up every single square inch, because when we think about it, homes are not normally just big open pieces of space. We normally utilize every single bit of space. The other tricky part about these builds is you kind of have to almost decide what the personality is before you know the sim. Now, that means that you might have a more masculine presenting sim, you might have a more feminine presenting sim, and you really have to figure out how to find that middle ground where any sim could live in this house and enjoy themselves, even if they're more masculine or more feminine presenting. I always make sure my toilet paper is facing the correct way. There is indeed a correct way to face your toilet paper, in case you did not know. One thing that always irks me is when I forget to do ceilings. So anytime that I do remember ceilings, it is a lovely, lovely feeling. Now getting to the the garage. The garage was probably my favorite part to build because the garage just ends up being a catch-all for all of the clutter. Now, because this is a stereotypical suburban home, we want to make it as typical suburban as possible. And the garage often ends up being that space where just everything extra goes. I had to give them a nice convertible because Plum Gen Air is a doctor and they wanted to have the nice things in life. You spend 80 hours working a week, I think you probably deserve some nice things for yourself. Then there ends up being all of the typical storage. You have the flower arranging table. That is maybe just a regular gardening table. The Christmas tree goes out here. Maybe extra hobbies that they tried. Maybe they took their shot at gardening and it just didn't pan out. Then you see me inevitably find things that I realize I want to have in here. Why a whiteboard? I don't know. I just thought it was interesting and took up a good amount of space. Per usual, you see me fighting Tool and then just get incredibly frustrated. I'm not good at Tool in that once it's in its angle, I need to make sure that I put it in its spot in that angle. However, I'm not good at the move feature to then move it into the exact spot I need. That's definitely something that I need to work on a little bit more. I turned this countertop into kind of the Tool catch-all place. So yes, there's the cross-stitching in the corner, but then there's also the little gardening kit. I really did love that tile. I know I had all my other tiles panned out, but I thought it would be really cohesive to kind of put them all in the same thing going all the way through. Shocker of the century, I find a blank wall and I absolutely have to cover it as best I can. I thought that portrait was really pretty. It could be a portrait of the family. And now I'm looking for any bare wall that I can find. Now, I think I've missed a clip a bit somewhere, so I do apologize. Sometimes that does happen when I'm building and going super fast, or if my screen recording app crashes. But this is where we come into the landscaping portion. I really struggle with landscaping. It's not something I do a lot, and it's very much not an easy thing for me. I really wanted to focus on making this a nice suburban yard. Those are often, they're well kept. There's flowers absolutely everywhere. There are things for the kids to do. There's a nice outside area for the parents and their friends to relax in. So I was really focusing on just making this absolutely flushed with greenery and different activities galore. A lot of the time, builds can be absolutely beautiful, but if there's nothing really for the Sims to do, then it's kind of just a beautiful piece, which sometimes that's the case, and that's totally okay. But because this is my legacy challenge, I wanted to make sure that it's a space that also has a lot of activities for all of the family to do. I think the trickiest part for me when it comes to columns and banisters are not every column has a matching banister, and that can be really frustrating and confusing because how do you make them match? I think the answer is no one really knows. You just have to guess and hope no one else notices. This is where you see me really start to struggle. So you'll see me trying to put stuff inside and outside to just add a bit more, but also trying to make it a productive space outside. One thing a friend told me when I told her I was struggling with landscaping a lot, she said choose 3 or 4 landscaping items. So choose a couple bushes, 1 or 2 flowers, or 1 or 2 bushes, a couple flowers, and 1 or 2 trees, and leave it at that. Only decorate with those, because otherwise you end up in a situation where you have too many options and you don't know what direction to go. Whereas if you're choosing only from a couple bushes, a couple flowers, and a couple small trees, then you have a much more cohesiveness to the entire build. And of course, because the heir is a doctor, we needed to make sure that we gave them outside dining on those nice summer nights, but they take time off, especially if they're in an office. You know, they're off on Fridays at like 3 o'clock. So might as well grill in the summer. This is where, again, you can see I pick up the camera pace because I'm putting on finishing touches at this point, just trying to get it all complete. And that corner window, still the death of me. Alrighty, my friends, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.